To anyone who's not overly familiar with the MG brand, you would probably think of most of their cars as being fairly normal, maybe with a slight inclination toward performance, the ZS, the ZR, the ZT, as the one shown here is, and you'd probably think of it in this kind of sphere. A wagon that you can use every day. It's technically a performance car, but not exactly most people's first choice of performance car, even in the early 2000s. However, when you start to notice the pictures of this particular MG and notice some of the stuff that's written on the car and the kind of vehicles that it's parked up against and the aerodynamic wheels that it's fitted with, then you might start to think, what's going on here? This is a little bit different. Now, this car, of course, won't be a surprise at all to anyone who is versed in MG's models, because it's one of, you could arguably say, the most important cars they've ever built. And MG, for those who don't know, actually have a very long and strong history of making record-breaking performance cars. Now, as far as their road-going performance cars go, you'd probably think of the SVR first and foremost. That's my personal favourite MG, one of the rarest British exotics. These days, they're not so much in the performance field anymore, now that they were bought out and shifted around, but in the early 2000s, they made a car which carried on a tradition of theirs, a tradition of making record-breaking vehicles, dating way back, including stuff like the EX181 project. Now, this car is commonly known as the ZTT Bonneville, but technically, it's actually called the X15 project. And basically what this car is it's a land speed record car, and it's one which set a record that still hasn't been beaten to this day. It was set in 2003, and nobody has beaten it. Not that it couldn't be beaten, because there are certainly wagons out there that could take it on, from BMW, Mercedes-AMG, a number of others could probably do it if they set their mind to it, but for various reasons, they haven't, and this car still holds the record for being the fastest wagon in the world. This is a serious performance car. Now, MG didn't publicise this particular event all that well, and that's one of the main reasons why you could genuinely call this an unsung hero, in a very literal sense, because a lot of people who aren't MG fans have no idea about this car. They've probably never seen it, never heard of it, and even if you did see it, you might just assume that it's a modified regular version of an MG, maybe even something that somebody has modified themselves, just like a tuned car in effect. And that's kind of true, except it was done by MG, or more specifically, it was overseen by MG. Now, the car itself has an engine swap to a 6-litre naturally aspirated Roush V8. It was developed in the States, and that naturally aspirated engine, no turbos, no supercharger, no intercooler, puts out 765 horsepower. Now, the goal for the car was 200 miles per hour. They wanted it to be the quickest wagon in the world. And these days, 200 miles per hour doesn't sound as impressive, especially not when you think about stuff like the BMW M5 wagon, which could probably go about 205, 207 miles per hour, at least based on the sedan's performance. But when they actually took this car and tested it, the first run that they did was 164 miles per hour. That was just a test. The second run that they did for licensing to allow it to run at Bonneville, they hit 182. Then the third run on the short course at Bonneville, which is only for cars that they're not entirely sure about the performance of yet, it did 207 miles per hour. Now you're really talking. Now that was just the short course test. They've already surpassed the goal that they wanted of 200 miles per hour to prove, for primarily sales reasons, what their cars were capable of. Yes, it was modified, but the car itself wasn't modified that much. It was just the engine. They wanted to show the inherent ability that their cars had of coping with extreme performance and still performing well. But then they took it on the long course, and they hit 223 miles per hour. But they weren't done yet, because the official record for this car, which has, as I said, still not been beaten to this day from 2003, was 225.6 miles per hour from a naturally aspirated, not too heavily modified wagon. It was fitted with a parachute, more aerodynamic wheels, and a swapped out engine. Whereas, of course, the road car uses a around 4.6 litre V8 with considerably less power. But as I said, that wasn't exactly the point. They weren't showing off that the road car could do this as well. They were showing what the road car could inherently be capable of. The chassis, the body, the reliability, and it certainly went to show that. And even though, for the most part, it was only MG enthusiasts themselves who even heard that the car was capable of this, it is still a car that very literally is worthy of being talked about more, because it still hasn't been beaten. Now, it would be interesting to see, and it will be interesting to see, if any other manufacturer, either a smaller one or a bigger manufacturer like Mercedes or BMW or Audi even, ever does try to beat that. Because, of course, in the performance world, top speed is kind of meaning less and less, even in the supercar world, but still, speed records are a very impressive form of marketing, as this car went to show, at least for MG fans. It certainly gave them more confidence in the brand and in the car that they could potentially purchase. But it is kind of unfortunate that the car didn't get more press than it did. There are certainly people who are aware of it, of course, but not as many as you might think, especially given that this car is quicker than a Gump Apollo. But it's a wagon that you can still put stuff in the back of. So I think this car is actually a pretty cool one, even though I'm not the biggest fan of MG. I'm certainly not the biggest fan of the ZTT in general, but I think this is an awesome car. The performance is fantastic, especially when you bear in mind that it is still naturally aspirated, which is just inherently cool to me. And yeah, it definitely deserves a place here. But that's it for this pick overall. Of course, if you want to check out plenty of other undervalued or forgotten cars from the performance world, the racing world, the concept world, then you can click through to the playlist at the end and check out all of the previous episodes. But that's it for this pick, of course. I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.